Welcome back to the Fit for Life podcast. A bit of a different setup today, a bit more relaxed and chilled. Good to see you guys. First recording of 2024. The season 2 will be a few episodes in now, so we're rocking and rolling with the waves. But hope you like the new setup. Let me know what you think. Got one of my best mates with me here today. He's been on the podcast twice before, haven't you?
I have, yes.
Yeah. My best mate Wes over here. And we covered a few bits on our previous podcast talking about anxiety, bits like that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Some of them are pretty emotional.
Yeah.
I got pretty emotional.
Yeah, you did.
That you disclosed before, like. And a lot has happened since. Wes kind of covered on some of the podcasts about something that you were going through personally, but we didn't want to hop too much into because, and then until you were diagnosed, I think you felt a bit.
Yeah. I think until obviously I was diagnosed with it, then that I didn't feel comfortable talking about it, but now I am, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? So, so you have been diagnosed now with ADHD.
I have, yes.
Haven't you? After living like your pretty much whole life.
37 years with ADHD, yeah.
Undiagnosed, which is mental.
Yeah.
And I've said to you a few times, because we're close mates, I said, it's a strength because you've lived your whole life without being diagnosed, but you've had coping strategies in place to kind of deal to the best of your ability that you can without having that diagnosis or assistance, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's been the biggest learning curve over the last 2 years, is just learning so much about ADHD and how that's affected me in my life. And obviously that's why we're here today, to sort of discuss all that.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously it's something's become bigger, hasn't it? And a lot more people diagnosed with it. And just doing a chat about what it is and building people's understanding of what it is and things you've been through. This is probably going to be a few podders, I think, to be honest, because we both like to talk.
Yeah.
But also within that, going through what it's been like to have it, so people might be able to relate, and also what it's like to go through the process of being diagnosed, how, frustrating that can be at times, which I know it's a long, grueling process for an awful lot of people. And then finally being diagnosed and what you felt going through that process.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's do an introduction to ADHD first.
Okay.
I'll let you explain what exactly it is and what are its main characteristics.
Okay, so ADHD, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically a condition. It's actually a disability. And with that, there's two different types. There's inattentive and there's hyperactive. So like the inattentive side is like getting distracted by things and not able to concentrate. Also like impulsivity and things like that. So a lot of people will like spend lots of money that they don't have or do sort of thrill-seeking sort of things. Then you've got like the hyperactive thing. Now, when you say the word hyperactive, what springs to mind for you?
Like drinking a coffee, going fucking mental.
Yeah, or like what I was looking for was like hyperactive, as in like physically hyperactive.
Okay,
people have this conception of like it's you're hyperactive as a person. They don't think about the mind.
Right.
Okay. So like you can have a really hyperactive mind where like your brain just never stops. It is always thinking, always ticking.
Yeah.
Never ever ends. And I've got combined, so I've got both. So I've got the inattentive and do you know what I mean? The hyperactive, because I'm greedy and I wanted both.
Yeah.
So
put your bows deep.
Yes.
You're like, the worst it could have been.
it's like, so I'm very conflicted in my head at times, where it's a case of like 1 minute it's like go, I'll do this, I've got an idea in my head, forget about things all the time. I mean, there's so much to it that I think people really don't understand. I think you'll see a lot of stuff where people relate and go, well, everyone does that. Everyone loses things. And you're like, do you actually lose your house keys like 8 times in a day? Probably not. But you might lose them every day, once or twice, or lose your wallet or stuff like that. And I think there's like this misconception with it where it's like, well, isn't everyone a bit ADHD?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And I think like that's sort of that comes in with it all. But the main two types are inattentive and hyperactive.
And you've been diagnosed with both.
And I've been diagnosed with both, yeah.
Okay.
So,
but again, that comes down to strength, doesn't it, mate? Because you've led your whole life with it, and you've,
yeah,
yeah,
definitely. And I think like when I was going through all the questionnaires with it all and everything, it has like the inattentive signs and it'll have the hyperactivity signs, and you sort of rate yourself in a system of like, do you do it a lot? Do you do it a little bit?
Yeah.
Do you not do it at all? and I ticked every single box. So like I think, and I was high for all of them, and I think so from the get-go I sort of had a understanding that I was combined, but not everybody is, because you've got the two different types, because it used to be called ADD before ADHD.
Right.
So it was just an attention deficit disorder. There was no hyperactivity.
Right.
So whereas now it's ADHD. So it's the full title, and it's so it sort of covers both.
Yeah.
But you will sort of be told if you go through this process you are one or the other or both.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I get it. Sound. How would you say that the ADHD symptoms manifest differently in children versus adults?
So I think, obviously I've got kids myself,
Yeah.
and that, I won't go fully into it, but that's how I got the realisation for myself. So I've got a boy and a girl, so it's a really good example to give. So my son, I guess, and with myself, I was very, very hyperactive as a kid. Like, I did not stop. I was always squirming, always moving, always fidgeting, always like talking. I mean, I'm still the same now. But like, you just sort of feel like you feel different. But you can't put I couldn't put my finger on it because I didn't know that it was ADHD. Whereas like my daughter sort of does the same things, but she masks it. Mm-hmm. So she will hide her ADHD like in school, so it's less likely to see it, or around certain members of the family or around certain friends. Like, she will put on this mask, which you can't see the ADHD side of her.
Right. Would you say that's a coping strategy? Or
I would say it's a coping strategy, but it's harder to diagnose girls than it is boys, because girls, obviously our brains work differently anyway, but they are more high masking, whereas boys will... There's that saying, isn't there? Boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they're more boisterous and this, that and the other. I'd probably say as well, it's the forgetting things, it's the zoning out. So like, you could be talking, I mean, you've done it to me numerous times, like, Wes, and about like the 7th time I'll go, oh, hello, back in the room. And it's the same with the kids. I'll have to say their names like 10 times sometimes just to get their attention, or when you're telling them something, they won't retain it. And eye contact is a big thing as well. Yeah. Like they won't make much eye contact. That's something I always used to force, whereas now I don't, because the irony is with ADHD, if you're not making eye contact with someone, you're actually listening to what they're saying, but other people perceive that as rude. Yeah. So it's like all these sort of things, and I guess with the kids as well, it's also like the regulation of emotion is a massive one as well. So people with ADHD, especially kids as well, because you've got to think, as kids growing up, you go through lots of hormone changes and things like that, as you do with everyday life. And myself, growing up as well, I can sort of say that as well, is like anger was always, and frustration was always something that I've always suffered with. I wasn't really, as a child, I was more of an emotional crier, but as a teenager, I was definitely more of the sort of something little that would seem to everyone else would just blow up for me, and I would just go from one extreme to the other, and there was no in between. I'd just literally shoot up here and be quite sort of angry, frustrated, aggressive at times, verbal and things like that. And I see that with my kids when they get frustrated with things. But like I say, like in the school environment, they'll mask it because they don't want to. It's not a case of them getting in trouble. It's a case of they don't want their friends to see them like that. They don't want... And I was very much like that as a kid. I try and mask it because you don't want people to think like you're this little psychopath or this little angry head or this kid that cries all the time. So, you know, when you come home, that's when it sort of spills out. Right, okay. But yeah, I mean, that's like in a nutshell. But like things, as you go through life, you sort of learn how to cope with things, and you learn how to deal with things in a different way. Yeah. Whereas obviously as a kid, it's quite confusing, but I feel it's really good for me as a parent now, like having ADHD, and being able to explain that in a way that my kids will understand that. So hopefully they won't go through the sort of same struggles that I went through as a kid and as a teenager and as a young adult as well. Yeah, yeah. So yeah. Which is quite, it just empowers you, doesn't it? But that's how you got on this journey, wasn't it? That's how you, you know, you found yourself to be through speculation through the kids, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean that's the maddest thing is like we were literally, it was the school and the school picked up on things with my son. And they were like, we think, we think, potentially there's something there, be it autism or ADHD or whatever. So they sent us this like little workshop, and I knew quite a bit about autism, but didn't really know a lot about ADHD because I never looked into it. And I was sat there and they were going through like all the symptoms of ADHD, and then I just sat there going, I do that.
You had a mental checklist, didn't you? You're like,
I do that in my head, and then literally it was like the eureka light bulb moment, but like it just exploded and shattered across the room, and then I was just like, oh shit, I think I've got ADHD.
Yeah.
And then that's where like my journey began after that.
Yeah. Cool. What a journey it's been. It's been mental, man.
Yeah.
Can you share some common misconceptions? I mean, you touched a little bit about a few things on there, but I think the good things that you covered were like the eye contact thing, which, you know, like myself, unless I knew that. I know that because of yourself. I was going to be my best mates. People that hear people being always diagnosed with ADHD would never know that.
Yeah.
So what are some of the like common misconceptions that people have?
So a lot of the common misconceptions is people are lazy. Okay. So that's the biggest one, that people are lazy, because you will be stuck in like task paralysis where like, you know, you need to do something, but you just can't do it, and you're overthinking it, and you're beating yourself up in your own head, but you just can't get up and do it unless there's like a deadline to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless there's like half an hour and it needs to be done, and then all of a sudden you're like, boom, 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 let's do this thing.
Yeah.
I'd probably say the other misconception is, you know, you're not listening, you're not paying attention. I mean, this is like what it was like for school. You're always fidgeting, you're always messing around. You're not sort of working hard enough. You should be getting A's in school. You shouldn't be at a C level. You're brighter than that. Yeah. And it wasn't a lack of trying. It was like I couldn't retain the information. I can articulate myself very well verbally, but when it came to sort of being in a classroom when there's loads of noise and there's that sensory side, there's all of that too. Yeah. You know, noises, lights, things like that you pick up on and they distract you. It's like you could just be sat there and a seagull just goes past the bloody thing, right? And then you're just like, I'm gone. Do you know what I mean? And like you could be in the middle of a conversation, or you're chatting to your friend, and then a plane's just like going above you, and you're just like, oh right, plane. Do you know what I mean? Like, they are like typical examples of what I'm like, or I'll just spot something. Like the common thing is that, ooh, shiny. Like it's a common sort of joke within the ADHD community, because that's what we're like. We just spot something that no one else sees and like, ooh, distracted.
Take shit and fully invest in that one thing.
And that's it. And it's just being distracted. Yeah. And I'd probably say there's also that naughty boy syndrome that people always talk about, where they go, that's what ADHD is associated with. It's associated with naughty boys. And that takes it away from the women as well, and the girls that need the diagnosis, because it was always the kids who played up in school, the kids who made noise, the kids who flipped tables, who were inappropriate and things like that. And I think another thing to sort of cover is RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is, as someone with ADHD, I suffer with quite a lot. And sometimes if someone cancels a plan on you, not that that's about you, it could be a legitimate reason, but then you can think, oh, that person doesn't want to meet up with me. Or someone could say something not meaning it and you take it the wrong way, and you internalize that, and your brain goes a million miles an hour constantly thinking and making that negative sort of process. Yeah. And here's a really interesting statistic for you, is people with ADHD or just neurodivergence in general get 10,000 more negative comments through their childhood than a neurotypical would. Yeah. Because you're always being told to do better, to work harder, to listen. And I think being someone who was undiagnosed, obviously the people who educated me, even my parents, they didn't pick on it, they didn't know. So there's that level of guilt from my parents for that side of things now. But I think education-wise, things are getting better. So it's like all those negative comments shape who you are as you grow up.
Of course.
So I think it's like, and sometimes people aren't aware of that, and I think it's just through lack of education. So obviously me talking about this and the stigmatization to do with ADHD will sort of help people with that, really, and understand it a little bit more, because like I said, I think it is just that people run round and are just hyper, or just say inappropriate things all the time, or butt in all the time. That's another thing. Let me just cover that dead quick. So it's like you could say something, and in my brain I am like, oh, I've got a story that relates to that. Now, it's not that I'm trying to take over. I'm not trying to take over your conversation. It's just that I've got an example of how I can relate and how I went through something similar, and that's how I express myself. But if I don't tell you that information there and then, I'm going to forget it.
It'll be gone.
And then you'll go to me like, so what was you going to say? I'm like, don't know. And I think that's what's good about me and you, because you have that understanding about me. So if I cut you off mid-sentence and say what I need to say, you're not going to go, for fuck's sake, Wes, you've interrupted me again. Like, you get it. You're like, he needs to say something because it's in his head.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like for us ADHDers. Do you know what I mean? And that's what it's like for kids, because they'll just blurt out answers and they'll say things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's something as well that I think people think we're rude because we're interrupting, or we're making it about us, but we're not. We're thinking of a scenario that relates to what you've just gone through or something similar, and we're just trying to express that to sort of show you that we understand how you feel, because that's something we struggle with as well. So
yeah. Cool. I think obviously our childhood, it wasn't as well known, was it? You know, you hear the things. I think when we were younger, it back in our childhood, it was just, if you played up and if you were this and that, it was just you were just seen as a bad behaved kid, weren't you? It wasn't seen to be. There wasn't this education and knowledge that we have now.
No.
Not that I know of when we were kids. I don't think we knew anything of it, did we? So
no.
I do think very much so the kids, you know, the teachers and parents back then had no idea.
No.
And it was just governed and just...
I think as well, it was, like I said, it was that naughty boy syndrome.
Yeah.
Where unless you were this really disruptive child, you weren't going to get picked up. The likes of me, who did well academically and things like that, but suffered with all these very clear symptoms of ADHD, just didn't get picked up because it was just foreseen as I wasn't trying hard enough, because there was that lack of education of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, was it even that medically aware when we were younger though?
Yeah, there's people diagnosed with ADHD. Yeah, I mean it's I can't quote how many years.
No,
But you know, it's been around for a while. It's just that I think with social media and things like that, and I think especially during COVID, a lot of people like myself as well, who had suddenly gone from being out there in the world and coming up with all these coping strategies as you grow up.
Yeah.
When that was stripped back and we sort of were stuck at home, it was like someone hit the reset button. And all these sensory issues that I never had an issue with come to fruition. So, yeah.
Silence. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, this translates exactly into what we were just talking about from the misconception. So, how the understanding of ADHD evolved over the years. You've kind of touched base there a little bit of social media, because obviously now like people are talking about things much more to people. People are more self-aware. Content like this going around, like your TikTok.
Yeah.
We can cover a little bit as well.
Yeah.
How do you think it's evolved over the years?
So I think I've only really delved into this for the last 2 years since I've had that like eureka moment. And for me, it was all about like doing research, and then after that, after about a year and a half, I was sort of struggling to sort of deal with things, and then joined TikTok. And then that's when I really, because I just thought TikTok was just full of wankers who dance. I'm not going to lie.
It's
not going to lie.
That's what COVID was though. COVID was public service announcement. COVID was TikTok was just wankers that danced.
But like, I didn't realise there was such a big ADHD neurodiverse community on there, and how knowledgeable it was. Like, don't get me wrong, you get these videos that are like, here are the 5 signs of ADHD. Do you know what I mean? And then people were self-diagnosing and things like that. But what it did bring was awareness. And I think for the people like myself, I learned a lot more on TikTok in those few months than I ever did. Because it's real people with real experience. And I think social media has really boosted that awareness. It's not all good. Some of it's bad. But what I mean is, it's how you take that information and how you do your research and educate yourself. You know, it's like when you read up about like ADHD, for instance, you're not going to go, oh, let's listen to Super Nanny or Joe Wicks. Like, do you know what I mean? And like, you look at peer-reviewed data that is correct and tested, and it's been accumulated by the right professionals, not someone's opinion. Do you know what I mean? So there's all those sort of things, and then, you know, you've always got those people as well who are like, ADHD isn't a thing, or, you know, everyone does that or whatever. But that's what I mean. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and like, I think the education around it has got a lot better. Like even in my kids' school, when we were talking about my daughter with the ADHD, which it took us longer to sort of see that within her. It wasn't until like obviously I'd gone through all the things I'd gone through I could see it more. But when I was talking to the teacher knew nothing about it, and then after showing him the forms and filling them up and everything, it was a case of he had a better understanding, and he thanked us for being educated in ADHD.
That's good.
So that, you know, that's all it's about. It's just spreading awareness, and I think it is a lot better than it was.
Yeah.
And I've definitely learned a lot more.
Social media is a massive part of that, isn't it? Which we'll jump up a bit more into your TikTok and that a little bit later.
Okay.
So in true ADHD-ness, what do you call it? What's the word?
Fashion.
That's the one.
Yeah.
As we were in the little break then, we have to do 20-minute intervals as we turn over recording stuff. We hopped into something, didn't we?
Yeah.
The interval there, go on.
Yeah, time blindness. So it's something that
Yeah.
I didn't cover. So like, we can get really hyper-focused in stuff basically, and thus the podcast. I'm interested in it, I'm interested in you, I'm interested to talk about this topic. So time blindness. We're on a 20-minute timer, and also distractibility. So every time our lovely person, Morgan, who's like helping with the setup.
Oh, it's in the background there.
Yeah. Like when he's moving, I was thinking, oh, is that the 20-minute? Is that up now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I suddenly stopped when we were talking before, and it was like, okay, he's finished. And I was like, I hadn't finished, but I just thought the 20-minute timer was up. So it's like, yeah, now we've got that sorted, so we can move forward, because I can actually see when the time is going to finish, so it's all good.
Yeah, we fixed it, but that's why there was a little silence there earlier, because you were like, right, we're done, and I was like, now we're good. So now we have a timer left of us. So that was a true example of how things can take home there.
Yeah, and then like that sort of comes into the fact that there's that thing with ADHD where people are always late, and it's not because they want to be late, it's because of time blindness, because they go, oh, I can do all these things, and then it's, ooh, look, I need to put this, ooh, I found this torch that I've been looking for ages, and then now I need to go and find batteries, and you just jump from one thing to the other and don't actually go back to the task at hand. So it's like,
that's really funny, because you pretty much just explained my father there, because he does exactly that. But the whole life we would be going somewhere to go and do something, or a family day out or something like that. And it'd always be like, oh, I'm going to start doing something in that half an hour window we got to go, which most people would be like, no, I'm not going to do anything, I'm leaving in half an hour. He'd be like, no, I'm going to start like ripping down a fence in that half an hour, and then get fully invested in it, and then be 5 minutes late, and my mum would be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's like you just get that idea in your head, and you're like, I need to do it now. Do you know what I mean? Or you'll just change the plans last minute, but it's on your terms, so it's good. But if anyone else does that to you, you're like, what are you doing? You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't change the time. You can't change the place we're meeting up. You can't change the restaurant we're going to. No, that's not okay. But if I do that, it's fine.
Sound. Right, so we're going to hop a bit more now into Wes's personal journey. And what I thought was going to happen before what I said to the editor about the timer going off, the MacBook's going off, the MacBook has gone off. Just so, so that was irrelevant. Anyway, he's got the time on him, so we'll be fine. But so your personal journey.
Yeah.
So when did you start noticing symptoms of ADHD in your own life? So predate to obviously your son going through school, what he went through, and being diagnosed. Was there any moment prior to that you thinking I might have ADHD at all?
Never, because I just thought this is me. Like, don't get me wrong, I've always known that I think differently, I act differently. I'm a bit outspoken, I'm a bit quirky, I've been a bit mad. Do you know what I mean? But I always felt different, and I always felt like I didn't quite fit in. But I think throughout my life, I figured out how to make friends. I figured how to fit in. I figured out how to mask up, how to make people like me without giving them the true version of me, which is like, that's what masking is. So like, masking, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like throughout your life, you'll come across different people, different scenarios. And what you do is you sort of pick all the things that work and put them together and then create like this new persona, because when the real you does slip out a little bit, you can upset people and things like that. So it's like you sort of mask up. So I think life makes a lot more sense for me now. The things that I've gone through as a child, the things that I've gone through as a teenager and an adult make so much more sense. But up until that point, ADHD never even crossed my mind. It wasn't until I was in that scenario with that meeting about my son, and they pointed out, because it's purely the fact I was uneducated, and I even had that stigmatized view of it's just people that are naughty and hyperactive, because I didn't know anything about it. And that's what I mean, is it's obviously it's not okay to have those opinions and be like that blasé about it, but at the same time it helped me educate myself, and I now understand that a lot more than I ever did, and it's helped me understand myself in ways that I never knew. And I think going back to sort of the podcast we did on anxiety was something I was struggling with because I was trying to process the ADHD, and I was having now a lot like sort of grief of things that could have been. I've got diagnosed earlier and things like that, but I still didn't know definitively if I had ADHD at this point, and from that was causing lots of anxiety because it's like living all your past again, going over everything and just torturing yourself, and it takes time to process that and go through it. And that's why I was having anxiety attacks, because it was overwhelm and overstimulation amongst other things. So yeah, like I said, I've learned so much in the last 2 years, but especially on TikTok. And like I said before, not all the content on there is brilliant, but a lot of it is. It's like anything. It's like in fitness. You're going to see people who give out dud information and stuff that isn't correct. Do you know what I mean? And you're going to see content creators that do really good stuff. Do you know what I mean? So that's the joys of social media. So it's just being aware of not believing everything you see, and like I said, just doing your research, and that's all I've done. But then equally, probably the biggest tip I could give to someone who is thinking, I have ADHD or I tick a lot of these boxes, and what you're saying really relates with me, Wes, is look at your own life, look at the symptoms of ADHD, inattentive and hyperactive, and then look how that affects you in every day-to-day life. Don't compare yourself to someone else, because your upbringing's different, you know, your life experiences are different, the things you've done in your life are totally different to me. And it's about linking that together and making it how ADHD affects you and how it sort of impacts your life, and then taking it from there. Some people don't feel like they need a diagnosis. They're quite happy to just go, I might have ADHD, I can live with it. Other people need to know.
It is funny. I've actually got a client who says that he knows he's definitely on the spectrum of it, but he knows that he can control it. It's not too off the wall or too far. He's aware of it, but he manages it quite well. And he knows with himself, he gets excitable about things, but he doesn't feel like it's something that he can't manage. So being obviously a bit more self-aware with that. So what do you think, what was some of the for you looking back now, some of the biggest challenges that you had growing up, being, you know, undiagnosed ADHD?
So I think it was just fitting in. I think I always felt like I struggled to fit in with anything. I was bullied quite a fair bit when I was like a kid. When I was like younger, I was bullied quite a few times. And now looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not condoning bullying in any way, but it's like it's like we all know if you're different and everyone else can spot that you're different or sense that you're different, then you're looked upon as like a weaker target to pick on, or this, that and the other. So I think like in my head now that makes sense why I was bullied. Like I can understand the reason why other kids, because if anyone's different, that's usually the case. It doesn't matter what that difference is, if it's a disability, if it's a race thing, if it's whatever it is, that's where bullying stems from. And I definitely think academically, like growing up being told, you know, you need to work harder, like I covered before, you're not paying attention, you're easily distracted, you're always messing around in lessons, you know, why don't you understand this? You know, why aren't you getting these grades that I've predicted you, because you know this subject? And I think especially in like exam conditions where you're in a big hall and you've got all the noise going on, and you know, you think how I'm getting distracted now as an adult with the things that I've discussed, like just doing this podcast. Can you imagine being sat in an exam hall with everyone coughing, writing, clicking pens, teachers walking up and down past you? Do you know what I mean? It's all distractions. And I think as an adult, I did an exam, I told you, didn't I, the other day, I did an exam within university because I'm doing my mental health nursing.
That's right.
And what was mad was, for the first time in my life, I was put in an environment that was suited to me. It was a quiet room. There wasn't many people in there. There was no noise. There was no distractions. I ended up getting the highest mark out of the entire cohort and getting 81%. And that's never happened to me. And that's purely for the fact I was in an environment that suited me. And I think that's something I was never in. Classrooms aren't designed for kids with ADHD. And the thing is, if you're not interested in the subject, like, you're not going to do well. Like for me, it was like I loved art, I love history, I love maths, science. Those were like the ones that I enjoyed. Every other subject I didn't like.
Yeah.
So I did the bare minimum because I didn't enjoy it. I couldn't get focused. I'd mess around in those lessons more than I would others because I just wasn't interested in what was being taught to me. And also you've got the distractibility of other kids. And then the thing is, as well, it's like you don't know who's like back then I didn't know who's neurodiverse around me. I don't know my group of friends. Back then we're autistic, ADHD or a bit of both or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it's, you know, funnily enough, you know, some of my friends who I was friends with in those classes are now diagnosed with autism or ADHD and we stuck together, and that's the mad thing. But we all went under the radar for years because of that, because we were bright kids that could do the work. I think.
Interestingly, did you think the friends you had back then, this is an outside the box question, do you feel like because of, although you were all undiagnosed, do you feel like you came together because potentially you had a relatability in that perspective?
Yeah, I think we just got each other. I think you didn't have to explain anything.
No.
And I think that's the thing is like, you almost, like I almost feel like I have to explain things to people for them to get it, to understand where I'm coming from, like over-explain too much.
I'm your only non-neurodiverse friend, aren't I? Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Every single friend that I've got, like my close-knit friends now, are either ADHD, autistic, or both. Do you know what I mean? So it's mad. And I think going to university was a big thing for me as well. That's when I think I talked about in like drug use and things like that when on one of the other ones, and like addiction's like a massive part with ADHD as well. Like you become addicted to things and self-medicate using substances and things like that, and that's something that I did when I was like late teens to like mid-20s, and that sort of dulled down my thought process for me. And when I tried other things, that was magnified even more. But then that weirded me out because then I was like, why is everything in my head so quiet? Why is everything so chill? Like, whereas my other friends who were using those substances would be like having a great time all over the place, like, and I'd be like, why am I not like them? And even it didn't even click then. Do you know what I mean? And then even when I was at uni, I was just so up and down. I didn't know like why one minute I wanted to be out and dead sociable with everyone. The next minute I just wanted to be left alone and wanted to be by myself and wouldn't want to speak to anyone or do anything for days. And now I realise that these were all like burnout cycles. These were all like being overstimulated and, you know, doing too much, and like other people didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? And like I didn't get it myself at the time. I was like, why do I feel? Because people would say to me like, well, you were just sat with us yesterday doing this, and this, and now you don't want anything to do with us. You know, what the fuck's wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know. So like even at that stage at university, it wasn't picked up, and that was like 18 years ago or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're old, aren't we? Fucking hell.
Yeah. So like even through university and early adulthood, and you know, I couldn't just like, I'd always be pestered to do everything. Like I'd always be told like, you know, like even at home as like a young man or whatever, as a teenager, my mum would be like, can you do the dishes? And I'd be like, yeah, in a minute. I'll just put it off. And now it makes sense because like it's not a case of like, I don't want to do it. It's like I'm struggling to process it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, a perfect example I can give you is like, my kids asked me for a drink, right? So let's just do a little bit of role reversal now, right? So my daughter asked you for a drink. What's your thought process?
Go and make one. Ask her what she wants. Yeah. And then go make it.
Right. So my daughter asked me, right? This is what goes on in my brain. Okay. So what drink do you want? Do you want it hot? Do you want it cold? What cup do you want? Do you want your princess cup? Do you want the one with the straw on it? Do you want this? Do you want that? So now if I go and get you a drink, so you've told me that you want milk, and then if I bring it to you, are you then going to tell me that you want hot milk? Or then are you going to then kick off and say that you want cold milk? And then is it going to be in the wrong cup? No, we've covered that. Now I've actually got to go get up, and then I need to go, and then what was I doing? That is literally my inner monologue, and it goes faster than that.
For every function.
And that's just a simple thing of just making a drink. Yeah. Okay? So forget complicated shit. Yeah. Do you know, like scenarios. And I think that's like, what...
Is it exam setting, revising for an exam or...
Yeah.
An interview. Like, to think of like,
It's retaining that information, but the thing is, the joy of it is though, if you really love something and you enjoy it, you excel in it. because you want to learn and you will retain that information. Everything else, nah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's why I say to you, it's like you should be privileged that I actually want to listen to you.
He does say that to me all the time. I'm like, yeah, this is true.
Because everyone else would be like, shut up. I'm done.
Trying to chat a lot of shit.
No.
Okay. Sound cool. So can you so going back to obviously your pre-years of diagnosis, can you hop to like, is there any specific time in your entirety of your life where you can like pinpoint where being ADHD significantly impacted your life? Like, because you in this whole process, you've been self-reflecting, looking back at things, thinking, would I have treated that situation any differently if it had been diagnosed?
I think
there anything you can pinpoint?
I think university was a massive one, and I think not just like university as a whole, but like certain things that happened to me at the time, like losing both my grandparents at the same time and stuff. Emotionally, I didn't know how to deal with that, and with ADHD, that's something you're emotionally dysregulated. So like things like that really, really impact you. And I think if I would have had the support that I've like got now at university doing my nursing degree, then I think it would have been a lot smoother sailing. But then I wouldn't probably be here talking about this, doing this podcast, you know what I mean? And I wouldn't have gone on the journey that I've gone, and I wouldn't have probably gone into mental health nursing. There's so many things, and I think you can only look back at your life so much, but it's done, it's happened. You can't change what's happened.
No.
Yes, life could have been different. Yes, I could have been successful in something else.
Yeah.
But I am where I am now. I'm proud where I am now. I understand myself so much better than I ever did. Like, you always say to me, I can see the difference in you. Like, the way you carry yourself and things like that, the way you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just having that level of understanding of, like, how ADHD is with me. Yeah. And that's what you've always got to remember, because I think the first thing when you think, I've got ADHD, and it really does kick into your brain, I've got ADHD, is what part of me is me and what part of me is ADHD. And you need to detach yourself from that straight away, because you are you. ADHD is your disability, and it will explain how you work and how you see the world. You're no different to anyone else, apart from the only difference is your brain works differently. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. And by educating other people and educating yourself, you're going to understand yourself better, and your friends and family will as well. But you will always come against people who, in your family or your friendship groups, that don't see it and don't agree with it. You're never going to get away with that. No. Do you know what I mean? So
interesting question was resolving around that discussion there. Do you feel like some people can get a little lost and allow the ADHD to be part of them more so than their own persona? Do you think that it can be quite conflicting?
I think when you become aware that you have ADHD, then even though you've known that's been part of you your entire life, it seems to magnify. Yeah. And the reason why it magnifies is because you're seeing it for the first time. Like, I would literally like walk into the kitchen and be like, because I'd left all the cupboard doors open when I've gone back in the room and stuff like that, and I'd be like,
your wife can't stand light, but you
well, that's what I mean.
Funny.
But I'd start to find it funny, and I'd be like, and then I do this, and then I couldn't find my house keys for like the 5th time in a day, and I'd just be like, because I'm just like, it's there, it's always been there, but it's like now I'm more aware of things, I see it more, and then you can see it in other people. Do you know what I mean? It's using like tools like fidgets, it's using tools, all different things that just work for you. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And adapting and making your life easier. And the only way you're going to do that is by like truly understanding how, and this is why I say it's so important to like sort of look at how ADHD affects you, not everyone else, and then tailor it to you, because that's the best way to heal, I think. So,
but it's mental that you even though when you went into mental health, you're obviously undiagnosed as your profession. Yeah. And you've gone your whole life being undiagnosed. Like, your kind of route has channeled you into, like, basically kind of like something at the back there was like, oh no, this is good for you. You need to go into this area. So like, it's always been there a little bit. You might not have been self-aware of it, but it's like something's just been there a little.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, I've always had the gift of the gab. Like, I mean, you worked with me for years. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? In that place we will not name. And it's like, Do you know what I mean? It's like, even then, I always had the gift of the gab. I'd always, like, if I had someone come to my till, I'd be selling them stuff they didn't even want, because I just taught them into it and things like that. And I think that's always been the part of my job that I've always enjoyed, is talking and listening. And that's pretty much what nursing is.
Cool. So more about the diagnosis process. So what prompted you to seek for diagnosis for ADHD?
So I think the first point of call was, like, obviously when I identified it within myself with my son and stuff, I just thought, like, this makes a lot of sense, like, but I need to definitively know if I have it. And then I was sort of thinking about, like, the career that I'm going into with nursing and things like that, and how it's going to affect me because my wife's got that level of understanding, my friends have, my family, like, that side of things is, like, all sorted. But within the workplace, like, with being a student, being out of work, being on placements and stuff, it was like, by having that diagnosis, rather than me saying I think I've got ADHD, it's like, I've got ADHD. So I just thought, career wise, it would help me, help people understand why I am the way I am, and just help me with day to day, and make people be a little bit maybe not as judgmental or as frustrated with me if I forget things or don't pick things up straight away. They'll have that level of understanding of, like, he's not doing it on purpose. No. It's because of his ADHD. So yeah, that was the main purpose for me. And I just felt like having it set in stone, you have this. Yeah. And then there's other options you can then explore then to see if they actually benefit you. You know, like medication or therapies and things like that, which you're unable to access if you don't get a diagnosis. So, of course. Yeah.
It's a bit of a journey of self-discovery. Self-discovery, really, isn't it? Because you're learning more about yourself at the whole process as well, which is obviously was, you know, we could probably hop more into that on episode 2, but your self-discovery and everything, I've witnessed how much you've changed throughout that. It's like fucking mind-blowing. So can you walk us through the process of getting diagnosed, like what tests and what processes are kind of involved with it?
Yeah, so initially there's like sort of 3 routes you can go down. Okay, so you've got like your bog standard NHS referral, but they can range from anything between 1 to 7 years, depending on
7 years.
Yeah, depending on like what area you're in, how many specialists there are in the area, how many people are on the waiting list. I mean, it's like a postcode lottery basically when it comes to that. Then you got option 2, which is your private diagnosis, which is where you pay to get assessed, basically. I think roughly for an assessment, it's between 1,200 and £2,000, depending on, like, it's a lot of money. But there's some people who are fortunate enough where, like, they'd be able to do that, or they need the answer there and then, and they can go sort of seek that out. But what you've got to be aware of is you will be paying for, if you go down the medication route, you'll be paying for your medication for the rest of your life. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. And then there's option number 3. So option number 3 is something that's called right to choose, which isn't necessarily advertised by the NHS everywhere, but if you literally Google it, right to choose, there's lots of providers. The one that I chose was ADHD 360. I think probably the most used one is Psychiatry UK, and there are other ones, I just can't think of them off the top of my head. And that is only in England. So obviously UK, we've got Wales, we've got Scotland, Northern Ireland, but you can't do it unless you're in England, because it must just be government legislation that just our English government's brought in. Right, okay. And basically you choose a provider and you take that information to your GP, and on the website it will give you like a cover letter that you can edit and fill all that in, so it's got like your address and everything on it. There'll also be like a form of like your symptoms of ADHD, like why you think you've got ADHD, and you literally take them to the GP. Now I was in the scenario where I had gone down the NHS route, was frustrated at waiting like
14 months you've been
14 months or something like that, 14, 15 months, I lost track. But it's a long time. Like, the benefit of it for me was I was able to understand myself a lot more in that, whereas I think if I would have just went right to choose, got diagnosed 3 months later, I think my head would have completely fallen off, and I wouldn't have understood myself in the way that I do now. So like, there's always sometimes a benefit by waiting, but I know some people need that instant closure and answer. So the right to choose process was 3 months for me, start to finish. So I went to the GP, explained how it was impacting my mental health, explained how this option wasn't given to me in the first place, because some GPs could be maybe reluctant or misinformed.
Maybe.
Yeah, because they're not specialists in ADHD. They
general practitioners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got to sort of take a step back and not take it personal. But that's the whole point of this, is to like educate people, and sometimes you need to even educate doctors.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So then they sent my referral off after I had that conversation with them. I think it was about 2.5 months after that referral was sent. I then got like a text message from ADHD 360 on my phone with a username and password, and I was like, shit just got real.
Yeah.
So it was like...
I think you texted me that day. I remember you like discovering for your laptop that day to get logged on.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my God. And I had like loads of stuff to do in the house at the time, and that just went to shit. I didn't do any of it. I just literally grabbed my laptop, switched it on, like went through there was like a few forms to fill in, and then this diagnostic test, which was just like red squares, red circles, blue squares, blue circles, and if it was like a synchronized pattern, you're like 2 red squares, you'd have to press spacebar, but it could do like 5 or 6 in a row. And I had to do like this test for 20 minutes, which was, I guess, was testing like how distracted I would get, or forgetful, or this, that, and the other, which it definitely picked up.
Yeah, you got harder after a few minutes.
But like after a few minutes, I was like zoning out. I couldn't remember what shape it was or what colour it was and stuff like that. So then I was, and then after I'd completed all of that, it then let me book an appointment. So, just before that, I had to put in like my height and weight and like what my blood pressure was and pulse and SATs and all of that.
Right.
So they just
general like health markers.
Yeah, and I think that's just more for the medication and just to give them an idea of what your baseline is and stuff. Because, you know, if you go down the medication route, if your blood pressure's too high, you can't take it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So you have to be like within a certain range if medication is something you wanted to look at and try with ADHD. So then after that, I literally got my appointment, and I was like over the moon. I was like, it's finally happening. All this time, it's finally happening. I'm going to get my diagnosis. And I was just like, I was buzzing for days until the day before the assessment, and like that imposter syndrome kicked in, was like, well, what if she tells you don't actually have ADHD? What if you don't have it all along and you've just built it all up and you've just filled your head full of all this knowledge, and because you know what ADHD is, then you've just like manifested all these symptoms, like imposter syndrome at its highest. And even though I get people around me like grounding me going, no, Wes, you have got ADHD, you definitely have. Like, you wouldn't have been talking about it for 18 months. You wouldn't have created a TikTok account. You wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have done all these things to do that. So, and it was quite a full-on week for me that week. So anyway, we get to the assessment, and I was absolutely bricking it. I was like nervous, anxious, all the things, because I was like, it's finally happening. The doctor who did my assessment, she was amazing. Kept me dead calm. She was just asking me all the questions that I'd already filled out in the form. She just wanted more detail. She wanted my point of view as a child, and she wanted my point of view as an adult. And we just talked through everything. At the time, I had a fidget with me, because she was like, do you fidget or squirm or do this? And I was just like, there's my fidget. And my legs going like this, like just bobbing up and down all the time. And by the end of it, she was like, well, it's easy to tell you, you've got combined ADHD. She explained the reason why. She then showed me the results of my diagnostic test, which pointed to high within ADHD. So basically they tested it with people who don't have ADHD and people who have, and most of the people that don't have ADHD would get a certain score, and I was in the very high category for ADHD. So obviously the test did what it needed to do, and literally I think after that diagnosis, it was just like that elation of like, I feel validated. I've got ADHD. I've got it. And a lot of people talk about like the crash and burn, and I didn't really have the crash and burn, because I think for me, I dealt with it for so long, and then to be told I never sort of felt I don't have it, and I still don't to this day. And it's been like a month and a half. Well, it's been a month, I think. Yeah.
I think you had a lot to kind of you had a big journey throughout the whole day. It was 17 months top and tail, wasn't it, by the end of it? So in that process, you self-diagnosed yourself, gone through that questionnaire that you did originally with it, and then you've been through it with your mum. You've talked about your childhood. You know, you've spoken to me or your friends or your other family. Everyone was saying to you, you're pushing toward this way. So you almost, you know, confirmed prior to going in. You knew it was there. You knew it was. You kind of worked through that a little bit. I know when you first heard about it, I remember those weeks you were a bit up and down a bit about it originally in the very beginning. Yeah,
but I think it's that taking it all in and actually having to accept it for yourself. And to go back to the sort of the diagnosis, like at the end of it, she discussed medication, and she sort of went through the different types of medication, what they do, and then she started me on a meds regime for me to take Elvance, which is lisdexamfetamine, and had a titration plan for that.
Cool. We'll cover that more on the on the
but it's just to make people aware, like in the assessment, like that. Those are the things that will be discussed. They'll discuss medication. Some people don't want to go down that route, but that's something I did. And there's, like I said, there's loads of different meds that sort of work at different rates. You've got to
find the one that works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, obviously what I've done. So it's just a case of that's pretty much the diagnosis process. So if anyone is waiting, that was my experience with ADHD 360. Now they do differ between providers. Obviously I'm still on the waiting list for the NHS one because I never took myself off it.
Right.
So when I experienced that one, I'm quite happy to share that experience if it differs in any way. But yeah.
Because you've been diagnosed through 360, will you still go through that process of the NHS, were you?
I think so, because I just think, like, even though the private diagnoses are valid, I think some people still have that opinion that it's invalidated a little bit because it's a private diagnosis and people perceive these people as not being professionals because it's not coming from the NHS, but they are professionals and most of them work for the NHS. But I have heard it. I've heard it from my own family members who've said certain things to me, who've said, like, you know, we've got to be careful with these private diagnoses because they misdiagnose people and stuff. And I'm like, but there's not really many people you hear that are misdiagnosed. No. But then again, it's all just like what information is real, what is hearsay, what people know. So I think for me, it just makes things easy with the meds going forward as well, because if I'm already titrated privately and then I can just switch over to the NHS with my medication for the rest of my life, and then I'm covered not just by England, I'm covered for the UK.
For the UK, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, for instance, not that it's going to happen, but I decided to go move to Scotland. I would then have to pay for my medication privately because I've gone through Right to Choose and it's in England.
I understand.
Do you know what I mean? So it
you kind of stung with that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you might as well go through that NHS.
Yeah.
So how do you feel? How do you feel when you got that diagnosis? When you sat there, Wes, you got ADHD. What feelings did you go through at the time?
I think, like I said, I was 99% there, so I'd like accepted it. But I think to be told by a professional, you have this, what type of ADHD you've got, was just validating. It was just like, I wasn't mad. I wasn't mad all along. I didn't make this all up in my head. Yeah. I didn't just go off on this big journey of self-discovery for no reason whatsoever. And I think that's the toughest part, is like when you're at that point where you truly accept it, but you've still not got your diagnosis. There's that little part of you that just doesn't feel complete because you're just waiting for that professional to tell you that answer. And I think that's the most frustrating part. So when you finally get that, and this is what I mean, like for me, because it's taken so long for me to get that diagnosis, and I've been aware of it for so long, I didn't feel like my head fell off when I got it.
No.
Because a lot of people say they go through all the grief, the imposter syndrome, this, that, and the other. Do I actually have it? This, that. I've not had any of that, but a lot of people who have gone through the process quite quickly do. And I think it's because I dealt with those things earlier on with myself.
And you also found TikTok through that as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, TikTok has been absolutely amazing. I've met some amazing creators. I've got my own account, which is ADHD Dad Journey, where I've literally just documented from not day one, because I joined the app about 6 months ago, but my experience with ADHD, like either doing memes or sort of videos about, like, I think one of the first videos I ever did was either the music thing or the pocket thing. So like the pocket thing for me was like, as an ADHD, I have everything in certain pockets in my coat because we're men, we don't really carry bags. And if, like, say my wallet is in a certain pocket and then I put my hand in and the wallet isn't there, I would then go and pat myself everywhere, because what's happened is I've put the wallet in a different pocket and got into like a panic, and then it's there and I'm like, and that's what I call the pocket thing. And there was a lot of people that related to that content with ADHD, and they were like, I do that. Do you know what I mean? And these were people that were either waiting for a diagnosis or had one. So yeah, TikTok's been great. I mean, not long after my diagnosis, I went to a big neurodivergent meetup in Manchester with loads of people with either autism or ADHD, or both. And that was amazing. Just meeting some really good creators who put some really amazing content out there to like meet them in real life and have those real conversations and just be in a safe space where everyone doesn't feel judged.
You be yourself. I think the bigger thing you said to me was that when you go back, you were like, I could actually go and just be me.
Yeah, I didn't have to worry I didn't have to worry if I was like burnt out a bit and couldn't speak to people, or if I was being a bit inappropriate, or I was being a bit bouncy, or I was being a bit this, or I was being a bit that. Like, I could just be myself. And I think the thing that really got to me was my kids. Not once did my kids get told stop interrupting, stop messing around, stop misbehaving, or have people staring at your kids. Because for me, like, I'm always self-conscious taking my kids anywhere with their ADHD, because I know how difficult they can be, or how it can be perceived that they're naughty kids, and it's not they're naughty kids, it's just they're dysregulated, or, you know, they're a bit loud because they want to get their opinion across, or they want to tell you what's on their mind straight away, and other people don't get that from the outside. And to be in that environment where they could just be themselves was like one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And it actually, like, when I came back and I processed like that weekend, I was so upset emotionally that the world isn't like that. Like, it got to me big time. Like, I was crying over it, and I don't really cry. And I think for me, that was like a real big eye opener. Yeah. Like, with it. And I was thinking, I want to feel like that every day. I want my kids to feel like that every day. And that's why I'm talking about ADHD and want to educate people, and give people that level of understanding. Which is important. And I think, but to drive back to that TikTok community thing, that you've very quickly found a small community of people that have all helped you. You've learned from them. They've learned bits from you. It's helped develop you, help you understand. It's helped. That's the beauty of social media now, isn't it? You know, it has its goods, has its buzz, like anything. But there's so many communities out there, like obviously your account that you mentioned. And give them a follow if you're not already. You know, if you have any questions, give them a bounce. Just help give people clarity and understanding, and like that helped you with the diagnosis process. What's the guy called that who is Paul. Quite in tune with it? Was it Paul? Paul, that knew all about that. That gave you that value and the understanding to be like, I know what I need to do now. I can run ahead and do it. It's important, isn't it? Yeah, massively. And I think like my account was always meant to be to document my journey. Yeah, but it was always there to help others. Yeah. And like, I think like anyone, when you create an account about something, like you with your fitness, as long as you feel like you're sort of helping one person, you feel like it's done its job. And I've probably helped way more than one. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And that's really awesome. And it's like, now I get people inboxing me, asking me questions and stuff, or they'll put comments on my videos and ask me how to do stuff. And it's like, I've actually got that knowledge base to be able to do that. Whereas when I first started TikTok, I didn't. And it just shows how much I've grown from my experience with the diagnosis, with being knowledgeable about ADHD and how it affects me, and just sharing that journey. And that's what the page was about all the time. Yeah. So yeah. It's quality, mate. You're doing well. It's awesome. Love your content. Quality. So we're getting toward the end now. We're just going to cover. You brought something up a minute ago that I didn't realise that you said a minute ago about how some of your family reacted about the diagnosis process you went through, and how that could not be factual. You haven't told me that. Since having that diagnosis, how have people around you reacted? Have you faced any like stigma? Who's been the most supportive? You know, what have you found since? What's been your experience? I think like my close friends, like you included, and my other ones have like known for a long time, and they accepted it pretty early on, and like not one of them turned around and went, I think you're getting a bit carried away with this, Wes, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you've got, like, I had none of that from like my friends. I think with my mum, once I started explaining it to her, she got it. My dad sort of got it to a degree. But, you know, there are people out there, like within the family, you know, that don't really see. And I think I don't know if it's like a generational thing, because like in their generation, these things didn't exist. Not to say that they weren't there, but they didn't exist. So I'm talking about people who are like, you know, 50s plus here, because that's the kind of people that I'm talking about here. And even though they accept that I've got ADHD and they accept me for who I am and this, that and the other, like they've never said one bad word, but like they just don't see ADHD as a thing, if you know what, if that makes sense. Like they accept me having it and they acknowledge that it exists, but they don't accept it as a thing. Like I know that totally contradicts itself the way I just explained that, but in my brain that makes sense. Like
no, it does. It makes sense.
It's and that's the thing, is like they've not been negative about it. Now I have had, like, don't get me wrong, I've come across people that go, well, everyone has ADHD, you know, everyone's a little bit ADHD and this, that and the other, and I'm like, well, not everyone's a little bit pregnant, are they, mate? Not everyone's a little bit diabetic, are they? No. You've either got it or you haven't, do you know what I mean? And it's and like I said, there's that stigma. It's like that lack of understanding, that education. It's like, well, yeah, someone might have 3 traits of ADHD, but that doesn't mean that they've got ADHD. It's just part of who they are and this, that and the other. So you do still come across it, and I think the thing is, like, I'll always challenge it. I wouldn't like back down. Like I had, what did I have someone say to me the other day? They were like, I was reading an article about ADHD and it was saying that, you know, you can be caught by eating processed foods or something like that. And I was just like, no, you're born with it. It's genetic. Yeah. Like the evidence is all there. It's genetic. You can't catch it. You're born with it. Do you know what I mean? But it's like anything in life, people's severity with their ADHD, like gluten intolerance, there's different levels. You might have someone who would go into anaphylaxia, do you know what I mean? Shock with gluten. Or you have someone who just has a bit of a bad tummy now and again. Do you know what I mean? They still have the same thing, but it varies person to person, and that's what I mean. And like, it's the same with ADHD. Because you've got your coping strategies, the way you've been brought up, like all these things come into it. So I think you're always going to get people that challenge you. You're always going to get people that don't believe something or believe a different theory or whatever. But like I said, it's just education, and some people don't want to know, and that's fine. Do you know what I mean? But like, I feel like having it, living with it, that I feel confident enough to speak up about it. And if I felt someone was, you know, giving out misleading information or believe something wrong, then I would challenge that. And I think I've always been like that. It doesn't matter what it is, I've always challenged people, which has got me into trouble over the years. But like, I think that's just part of who I am. And I will always challenge something if I don't feel like something sounds or feels right. And sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. But with the ADHD thing, I think so far, family-wise, friends-wise, it's been, can't really complain too much. And then it's just been, I think for me, my main worry is like going back into the workplace, like I was talking about earlier, and that's why I wanted that diagnosis, was because so people can get it and understand it, and then it makes sense to why I acted certain ways within that environment, why I would get frustrated, why I would get upset, why I wouldn't retain information, all these reasons that people thought I was lazy or I wasn't doing stuff. There's a reason for that. And I would never, the way I look at it is, I would never use ADHD as an excuse for anything, because I didn't use it for 37 years of my life. So why am I going to start doing it now? And I would never go, you know, I can't do that because I've got ADHD. I can't do that because I've got ADHD. I would go, I will struggle with this certain aspect of this problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be too noisy there, and I might struggle with the auditory side of things, but I'll give it a go. I've got these things called loops that I can put in, and then it dulls the sound down to not stop me experiencing things like that. So it's about making adaptations to your life, and letting people understand that and explaining how things are. Because I'm quite happy if someone asks a question to answer it.
It's like going into a war without any arms. It's having the tools that you need to be able to execute and do things properly. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you've dealt with something the entirety of your life and go into work and things like that, they have to understand in certain scenarios, if we give Wes this leeway or this tool, this additional assistance, he's going to be better at his job. He's going to be better at these scenarios. You're giving him...
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's back to that point of that when you don't know you've got ADHD. So when you know you've got ADHD, you start seeing everything. So all the things that maybe did bother me back then, I just powered on through because I was just like, oh, it's only for another half an hour, it's this, that and the other. Whereas now I'm aware of what triggers me, what overwhelms me, what causes my anxiety. Because when we were doing the podcast last time, I was talking about the anxiety attacks were pretty frequent for me, and they were quite a lot. I was feeling anxious a lot of the time. Since I've had my diagnosis, since I've started medication, and I've literally got that true understanding and that closure. And it's not to say that anxiety won't come back, because it may do, but I understand myself and it's subsided massively.
Brilliant.
So, and that's all about, like I said, understanding yourself and also having that supportive network around you, because I know I am very fortunate where I've got like the type of career choice that I'm picking, working in mental health nursing. People are understanding obviously about mental health, because that would just be wrong if they weren't.
It would, yeah.
You know, I've got a really supportive family and I've got really supportive friends, and not everybody has that infrastructure. So that has helped me massively as well. So you might not realise how much you've helped me by just being there, listening, understanding and taking it all in and learning about ADHD yourself through me. So, you know, thank you for that. And it's like family and friends the same. I don't think they've realised how much they've done for me, even though it is this self-discovery. It's also about what everyone else does as well, which goes unnoticed. So thanks.
You're welcome, mate. You've come a long way. Come a long way, mate. It's good. So we're gonna wrap that up there, guys. Just what's your TikTok again, mate? Show it one more time for me.
So it's ADHD Dad Journey.
Yeah. We'll tag it down below in the links anyway. So just if this resonates with you in this cast today about things that you're struggling with, or you like to see some of his awesome content surrounding his journey and what he's gone through, and you know you're hearing about some of it here, but a lot of it you've seen a lot there in real time. What your coping strategies are, the things you're dealing with day by day, getting other people's inputs, and that's what you're doing there, isn't it? You kind of ask other people's opinions that have ADHD, what they're struggling with, what their coping mechanisms are. To help yourself, but you're sharing it for the world to see, which is what's the great thing with social media is. So go give him a follow if you're struggling with things. But thank you, mate. That is episode 1 boxed off. How do you feel that go? You feel good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't stop.
No. But also interestingly, I was saying a minute ago, because we're going to hop this more about into like episode 2. Obviously he's been medicated now, but like he watched our previous like episodes, he's like twisting on the chair, or he's less going, but he's just like chill.
A lot more chill. Like, it helps with the concentration, but like that's for part 2. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, mate. It's good. Thank you for coming on. As I said, guys, to help us out with the cast and that, give us obviously subscribe, give us a follow on social media, on all the normal platforms, on Apple Podcasts, all that kind of stuff as well. Thank you for listening. Do give it a share with your friends and family too. And that's a wrap. That's us done. I will catch you on episode 2 very soon.